Hi there folks, welcome to the Minute to Midnight show. This is Tony coming to you from New Zealand, and don't forget our website is aminetotomidnight.com. Check us out there and also on YouTube and iTunes. I want to welcome a first time guest on the Minute to Midnight show, Jan from XtremeRealityCheck. And I came across Jan, I hadn't actually seen your stuff until recently, maybe a few weeks ago, and I started to watch some of your videos and thought, wow, this lady really researches things well. Some of the best research I've seen. So I'm really privileged to, and I think our listeners will agree, to have you on the Minute to Midnight show today, Jan.
Thank you. Thank you for the compliments, Tony. I appreciate it, but the honor is all mine. I love networking together with other people who are out here on the front lines trying to get the truth out. So thank you. Thank you for giving me a voice.
And I think that's what's kind of important, I'm finding, because we are being censored. I know a Minute to Midnight, we're being censored a fair bit and that. So the more we can kind of network with people that are of like mind, the better, I think, in this difficult time.
Yeah, it's about the only way now to get the word out, to make anything go viral or to spread it. We have to go person to person. We have to share it. We have to work together because they're working against us. So all we have is each other, which I think God, he created the body of Christ that way. It's time that we come together.
It is time that we come together, but at the same time, I'm also seeing so much lukewarmness and Christians that are, just not on the right page at all. And well, they just think of us as conspiracy theory nut jobs, we should be wearing tinfoil hats. But those are the people that are asleep, unfortunately.
Yeah, we're waking quite a few of them up. And I've been doing this since the late 90s. So back then, you didn't see very many people waking up. They didn't even want to talk about it. And nowadays, I'm seeing more and more and more people wake up. Of course, they're not in the organized churches and in the organized religions. They're starting to come out of there and come more and to us to listen to what we're saying, because it's that time. The Great Awakening is starting to happen, and the division's happening, the wheat and the tares, the sheep and the goats. It's happening right now. We're living it.
Totally is. And I have to say, before we get into the main subject, I've been sort of feeling a little bit discouraged the last couple of days. And yesterday here in New Zealand, we had a bill put forward by the politicians in Parliament to basically liberalise the abortion laws. And out of our politicians, I think 94 voted in favour and only 23 voted against. So we are really fighting an uphill battle. Even in New Zealand now. There's nowhere really that's safe to go. But it can be a bit discouraging. So, rather than be discouraged, I guess we've just got to do what we do, and the people that want to listen will listen.
Yeah, it is. It is a really heavy subject to talk about this stuff, but somebody has to do it because the Bible says that all things will come to light. Everything done in the darkness will come to light. So we do have a job to do, but it can be discouraging, especially being online personalities like this, because people hide behind that anonymity and they will just be terrible. You don't walk into the grocery store and just have people run up to you and start assaulting you and calling you names. But when you're online, it's part of your everyday life.
It totally is. And I guess I've learned to just, in many ways, I just censor it out. I know when there's personal attacks, I don't think we need to allow those to be posted online. So I just basically delete them these days. Can't be bothered because we certainly get them. But by and large, the majority of people are very supportive. And I think a lot of those other ones are actually probably paid trolls anyway.
Yeah, I believe that. People ask me all the time, do you delete tons of comments off of your videos? Because people must just think you're a crazy person. But I really don't. Like you said, there's those handful of really, really vile people who come after you. But for the most part, yeah, I've received quite a bit of support, especially recently, these last couple of years.
Yeah, that's good. And same. And it's really encouraging when you realize that the majority of people that listen do support you and support me, and that's a really encouraging thing. And when it's somebody that's an obvious troll, I don't have any problems deleting it. But if it's a questioning comment, that's fair enough. I leave those. But if it's just an obvious setup, nah, because all it does is bait other people anyway. So moving off from that, we're seeing a lot of things happening at the moment, including the shootings in America just in the last few days. And I get people asking, what's a false flag? They hear this term false flag and they think false flag means hoax, but they're not the same thing, are they? And both you and I notice you've just covered saying a bit of a description of that, and I wanted to do the same thing. I did one in writing, so I think it'd be a good time to actually maybe let people know what the difference is.
Yeah, in the video that I just put up about the El Paso shootings, I talked about that a little bit before. I showed some eyewitness testimonies that were taken right on the scene at the time of the event that contradict the official narrative. So I wanted to explain to a lot of people who think that when we say it's a false flag event, they think we're saying it's a hoax. And it's really sad, because my heart goes out to all of the victims. There is no doubt that there are real victims and these are real atrocities. The word false flag comes from back during the time of pirate ships, and they would launch attacks on other ships, but they would change their flag to a different country. So they could do the attack, but a different country or a different entity would be blamed for the attack. So that's basically what we're saying when we say a false flag. We're not saying that the event didn't happen or that everybody involved is an actor. And there are, I believe there are crisis actors that step up to give interviews and things like that afterwards that we've seen, because they've come out, they're exposed later on that they weren't even at the scene of the event. So I do believe that there are people who are involved in it afterwards, especially giving interviews, that may be actors. So I'm also not discounting all of those people who research this and have found anomalies like that. But for the most part, what I talk about is not that these events are hoaxes, but that they are false flags, that there is a network that connects all of these, they're not all school shootings, but they're, like the Las Vegas mass shooting, the Walmart shooting, yes, the school shootings, going all the way back to the JFK assassination, to Robert Kennedy, all of this, that there's an underlying network that is orchestrating this for social engineering. And it's presented to us in a false flag manner, that they say, oh, it's always this lone shooter. It's always a patsy. So they try to keep us divided so we never see the big picture. So that's sort of my thesis. I did a series on it called The Black Awakening, based on Russ Disdar's book.
Yeah, that's good. See, I say some arguments for how a false flag works. Like in a shooting, it could be a covert government operation or some other group operating and staging a shooting in a way that no one is meant to realise who's actually behind it, like what you mentioned about the pirate ships. Because often in those old false flag maritime things, the pirates would never even fly their pirate flag. They'd leave the false flag up there, or occasionally right at the end when they, I think, had the other ship in their sights, had maybe raised across the skull and crossbones at that point. But, there's many possible ways this whole false flag thing can be done. Like, for example, they could employ several shooters, but the whole thing gets framed on just one person and the other shooters slip away and are never caught. So the shooter that they may caught, that does get caught, may be a victim of, say, some trauma-based mind control like MK Ultra type stuff, who's been programmed for a specific time and occasion and then's triggered to perform their role in the shooting at that, appointed time and place. But there's, of course, other ways that false flags can happen and accomplished as well. You can have a mix of real witnesses and some stage crisis actors, like you mentioned, who slip in as well and tell false stories to distract it from the true story. And that's just, one example of how these things can be done. But the fact is that people usually really do die. in these false flag events. So they're not all up hoaxes, though there may be some aspects of hoax in them. And
Yeah,
yeah, tell us
absolutely.
more about the Black Awakening and that. What?
Well, it's based on Russ Disdar's work, where he has studied these MK Ultra programmed multiples and SRA families, these cabal families. And we see that right up until this Dayton, Ohio shooter that we just had. That when you trace the people involved, that family line, you have his father owning this enormous tech company that received $325 million contract from the NSA. Then you had his mother being an owner of another large tech company that annual revenue is over $27 million a year, and yet she's supposed to be a manager at Bath and Body Works, which just happens to be one of Les Wexner's companies, which, Les Wexner is connected to the Jeffrey Epstein case. He's the one who gave him the $77 million mansion and, all of that type of thing.
For
So it really
$10, yeah.
is. Yeah, it really is just one big network of people. And every time you research one of these shootings, if you do your due diligence, then you find the same players and they're all related. I mean, Les Wexner was born in Dayton, Ohio. And Jeffrey Epstein had another house besides the $77 million mansion that was connected to Wexner. He helped in the 1990s develop an entire community in New Albany, Ohio. And he had a house right next to Les Wexner's house there in Ohio as well. Epstein did. And for some reason, he signed it over, transferred it at no cost again in 2007 to Les Wexner's wife. So they have, their roots are deep in these pockets.
It's really interesting, sorry to interrupt, but how just yesterday, I think it was yesterday or the day before, Les Wexner's predictably trying to distance himself from Jeffrey Epstein. And CNBC article, Wexner made allegations that Epstein had misappropriated $46 million from one of Wexner's foundations and so he's now saying, he was deceived by Jeffrey Epstein to take the heat off himself. I guess that's, predictable, but he basically said, I'm embarrassed that, like so many others, I was deceived by Mr. Epstein. But, really, I don't think so, mate. I think you knew exactly who Jeffrey Epstein was.
Well, in fact, I think it's more than he knew who Jeffrey Epstein was. I think Epstein was probably a creation of Wexner's, because Jeffrey Epstein didn't come into the situation or onto the scene at Dalton School being a billionaire. It was the money came from Wexner and the mega group. They were the ones with all of the money, and they essentially set up Epstein. I mean, Epstein had no degrees, no credentials, no experience. He was moved through that system. So for somebody with the power and money of Les Wexner to say that he was duped by some lower level guy like Jeffrey Epstein, it's laughable. But not to the masses, because they don't have any idea.
Yes. Yep. And as far as the shooters went, because also in the El Paso, Texas shooting, you have links possibly to MK Ultra in that one as well, because Patrick Crucius's father worked for the Timberlawn facility, which was a mental health facility, and that's what he is. He's a mental health counsellor, and there are dubious ties to that place as well, and that go back to people like a guy called Ross. His first name escapes me at the moment. And there's a lot of ties back there, it would seem, to MK Ultra as well. So, as well as in Dayton, Ohio, it's really interesting. You don't have to dig that far and you start finding that there are ties.
Yeah, it was the same thing with Adam Lanza and James Holmes. Both of them had ties to the same psychiatrist. It's typical MK Ultra. And both of their fathers, what are the odds that Adam Lanza, from the Sandy Hook shooting, and then James Holmes, which was the Batman theater shooter,
Yeah.
both of them, different states, you'd think completely unrelated, both of their fathers were involved in the same LIBOR scandal. They were both set to testify right before that James Holmes shooting. And that was the rigging of the international interest rates during the 2008 financial collapse. Both of them were involved in that. Peter Lanza was the VP and tax director at GE Financial. And then James Holmes's dad, Robert Holmes, was the lead scientist for the credit score company, the FICO. So they were both involved in rigging that. And so they were set to testify before Congress in the very same case. And both of their sons, seeing, the same type of psychiatric treatment, are involved in these events. There's just no way that this can all be coincidence. They all know each other. They're all in one network.
Yeah, well, it certainly seems to be that way. And, of course, at the moment with the shootings, they're being blamed, regardless of who's really responsible, immediately pinned on white supremacists, as happened here in New Zealand. And I noticed I'm not a Trump supporter, so if people think I'm here backing Trump, I'm not, okay? Let's get that straight. Anybody that listens to A Minute to Midnight regularly knows that I expose Trump's links to things as well. So I'm not a Trump supporter, but neither am I a Barack Obama supporter. And I noticed that on August 5th, he immediately started tweeting about gun control and linking the shooting with white supremacy and white nationalists. And he said tougher gun laws won't stop all murders, and they won't stop every deranged individual from getting a weapon and shooting innocent people in public places, but they can stop some killings. So he's advocating for gun control, but my question is, if the mass murderers turn out to be programmed MK Ultra type operations, then these aren't just some random nut jobs doing shootings, but they're people who have effectively been weaponized by government agencies or some other organisation to fulfill an agenda. So how is gun control going to stop that?
Yeah, well, it's never been. I mean, it's never worked anywhere else. It's one of the places here in America that has the best, or the most, I can't say best, that's a misnomer, but the most gun control would be up in the Chicago area, and they have the highest crime. I mean, there's more deaths than the Afghanistan war zone up in Chicago, and yet they have more gun control than most other cities in the United States. If you take the guns out of the hands of people who need to protect themselves, you're not taking the guns out of the hands of criminals, because most of them have unregistered guns anyway.
Yes, that's true. I mean, in New Zealand, we are different with guns in America because it's illegal to own guns for the purpose of self-defense here. It has been for a long, long time. But, they've been clamping down on the gun laws here, and they've gotten rid of all semi-automatic weapons here. Well, they're trying to, because they've got confiscation or buyback scheme going on at the moment. Personally, I don't know. They used to have something called an E-class license here, where people that had those, you get a special license to have semi-automatics. And people that had that E-class license, I don't think there's ever been a single case of a gun crime committed by those people that had that class of license. But instead, they've just got rid of it and said, we've got rid of that license, we're getting rid of all semi-automatics guns in New Zealand, and they've made everyone appear to be criminals, who had them, and yet they'd not actually committed any crimes. I think about only 8% of gun crimes, I think, in New Zealand are committed by people that actually had a gun license, just a normal gun license, what we call an A-class license here. All the rest are unregistered guns anyway, or, unregistered gun owners, I should say, because we don't have a gun registration scheme here yet. But it's the criminals who do it that don't have a gun license anyway, not the the license owners here. So I don't know. It's like, I can see some point in them. You do want to keep guns out of the hands of the nut jobs and the people that are just angry and would likely do crimes with them. But at the same time, we've seen all the bad regimes like Hitler and Stalin and all the others, Pol Pot and Mayo, Chairman Mayonnaise, as I call him. Basically, they all got rid of the guns. So, it's like it's a bit of a sticky situation.
It's one of their steps. I mean, they have a playbook. You can just go throughout history and watch and see what they did, and we're seeing it happen again. And it's a slippery slope. I mean, when you start talking about thought crime, when you're punishing innocent people, because here we have a constitution, so you're innocent until proven guilty. And it's a slippery slope when you start punishing innocent people for things that guilty people, for crimes that other people commit. So, and that's the sort of idea behind the leftists, that they believe that you should punish innocent people when a guilty person commits a crime. And people go along with it. They use fear.
Yeah, it's interesting too, though, because, I believe the whole left-right paradigm is Hegelian dialectic, and it's being used to play people one against the other. So extremes on left and extreme on right are as bad as each other. But it's really interesting how, they immediately jump on the white supremacist and white nationalist, Trump supporting Republican types as being the criminals doing all the shootings at the moment. But the Dayton, Ohio shooter was actually a socialist.
Yeah, absolutely. We see that again and again, but they always try to cover it, and weird things like going in and changing all of their Facebook stuff, and all of a sudden, people who have screen captures showing that they were linked to all of these leftist groups, and then immediately after their page is changed to, all of a sudden they're a MAGA supporter or whatever. But it's like you said, it's all Hegelian dialectic, and it's really, when they create a narrative, they control both sides. So, but as far as the false flag thing goes, it's clear that they're doing the exact opposite. So if they're blaming what they're saying are white supremacists, then it kind of points to the Antifa people who, that's their narrative, right? The Antifa people are constantly saying they have to show up and fight all these white supremacists, and they have to do it with violence. And, you can go back to the anti-fascists all the way through World War II, the same thing. They believed they had to fight with violence. And so that's the whole Antifa shtick right now. They have to fight all of these white nationalists. The problem is they're not even fighting real skinheads. The actual white supremacist type neo-Nazi skinhead, you could fit all of them into one stadium in America. That's not who people are. I know Trump supporters here in my community and people who buy into the left-right paradigm and stuff, and they're just patriots. They want a better country. They want a country where we can raise our children, and they won't be, have all of this violence and hate and racial division and all of that's being created by the leftist media and large. We don't have a problem. I live in a town that has just as many minorities as white people, and we don't have any problem. We don't have any racism. Nobody's doing hate crimes against each other. It's all just propaganda that is building all this fear and creating a sort of mass hysteria.
Yep. And it's kind of sad because we should not have divisions. We're all human beings. Doesn't matter what skin color we are, or, who we support or don't support. And, we shouldn't have that. There's just no room for hate between groups, I don't believe. And especially as Christians, we just should not be buying into it in any way, shape or form. And there probably are some white nationalist nut jobs out there that do want to kill people, but they're
Yeah,
really a
yeah.
small minority of people. That's not the average white person.
Just a tiny minority of people. They really, yeah, but they're trying to group it together and say that anybody who's Caucasian and is a patriot and loves America, that they're all of a sudden this white supremacist. And I don't see that. I live here. I don't see that. That's not real. It's just propaganda to keep us, divided. Even with Antifa, when I look at them, most of them are just little college kids. When you watch the undercover tapes of them and stuff, even them I don't hate. I pray for them, because there are children who have gone to these universities and have been just thrown into this state of mass hysteria to the point that they feel like they really believe it. They really believe they have to get out there and physically bust windows and burn cars and fight, because they've been brainwashed to the point that they think they're just under siege, that, that this isn't just political discourse and normal and how it's always been. No, they really believe that, this is authoritarian and tyranny, and it's really sad, because these are just kids, a lot of them. Teenagers, young 20-something kids. They're not our enemies. They're our children.
Yep. And so, yeah, people, if you're listening, don't buy into the whole left right. The left's fighting the right, and the right's fighting the left, and on the extreme ends, because they're both controlled, I believe, by the same hierarchy above them, who are using it as a thesis and antithesis sort of situation. It's like, I've used the analogy so many times. When you watch a Western movie, there's always a good guy and a bad guy, and you always want the bad guy to get it, so there has to be a good guy, the hero. And so people have that kind of mentality and mindset now, that if Hillary Clinton is really, really bad, then Donald Trump by default must be really good. It's like, hang on a second, folks. It's actually entirely possible to have people on both sides that are not good. And I use the example to me of, say, the whole Wild West thing again, where you had Wyatt Earp and the Earp family that are sort of heroized as some sort of great people. They took down the bad guys and all that, but the reality is they were brothel owners and gamblers and not particularly nice people either, and yet they've been turned into heroes somehow, that they were the good guys. But I'm saying no, they were in it for their own thing, and they were not such great guys either. So there weren't a good guy and a bad guy. There were just factions of various bad on one side and not so great on the other side, and so we've got to get out of this mindset that says if you're a leftist, you're bad, so right must be really good, or vice versa. The point is that it's possible to have neither side being the good guy.
And it's time to look up higher, because these people are being manipulated. You take like Antifa, and they're created by the same agency as ISIS or ISIL, and you see they even dress alike.
Yeah.
The same corrupt CIA, rogue segments of these intelligence agencies. So it's not just left and right within a particular nation. It's nation against nation. And there's someone higher. There's somebody higher than the presidents. There's somebody, and most people don't realize that. They think that's sort of the top of the pyramid. And it's not even second tier. It's more like fourth tier, because the people who brief these presidents and world leaders, even if you assume, okay, every president goes into office wanting to do good. Well, who briefs them? There's no term limits on intelligence agencies. So some of these people have been in for 20 years or 30 years, president after president after president, telling their narrative, regardless of whether it's Republican or Democrat or who gets in. So they're really the ones who are controlling the decisions. And then, above them is a rank, and then above them even is the spiritual dynamics behind all of this. And that's why I was talking about with the JFK assassination and going back, that we see now these more recent shootings and stuff, or mass events that we see, always the anomalies are multiple shooters. We see everybody reports, whether it was the Las Vegas thing or this recent El Paso one. That was the video I put up. I put up several eyewitnesses who said they saw multiple shooters and dressed all in black. Not a white guy, a nerdy white guy in khaki pants. I put it up there in their own words. I didn't put words in their mouth. I just let them have their say. And the same thing with Adam Lanza. They said there were two guys dressed in black that ran off into the woods, but it comes out and then it gets covered up. The same way with the Batman Theater shooting. They said there were 2 or 3 shooters in there dressed in black. And it just, so we see this same, what are the odds that you would see the same reports? And you go all the way back to the JFK assassination. What did they say? Well, there was multiple shooters. There was one on the grassy knoll. And Oswald came out and said, I'm just the patsy. I was set up. And same way with Sirhan and Bobby Kennedy, the assassination. They said there were multiple shooters. They found, bullets in the ceiling tiles and in door frames, and all that evidence disappeared. So, this is nothing new. This has been going on before a lot of us were even born. And thinking about, is the president the person in charge? You can see with JFK, because he was fighting weapons trafficking, and he was going to take on the mafia, with his attorney general, with Bobby Kennedy and all this stuff. And they made a public display. They didn't do something secret. They waited till he was out and the whole nation was watching, and they're like, no, we'll just take you out in front of everybody. So.
Yeah, well, of course, the Kennedys were an Illuminist family, and they basically, obviously, went against the programmed, what they were told to be doing, and they were made an example of.
Yeah, because there were other Kennedys, that served their full terms on the other side of the aisle, and they did fine. They were allowed to, as long as they stayed in check. But see, I'm a person who believes that there are people within these families who defect. I've done lots of interviews and put up interviews with SRA survivors and whistleblowers, and so there are people who are on the inside of these groups and these families, and they do want to defect. And it's the same even with mafia families, the crime syndicates that we see. You'll see people lower level guys trying to knock off the Don because they want to be in the higher spot. Or you'll see the Chicago crime family fight and the New York crime family and stuff like that. So I don't think it's as cohesive and tight knit as everybody thinks it is. I do think that these crime families do even struggle amongst themselves for power.
I think the same thing as far as countries with the New World Order. We're heading towards that, a New World Order, one world government sort of thing. But I even think countries are vying for top positions within that. So it's not as cohesive as you would think, or as many people would think.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that we see that a lot with a lot of the in the communist bloc, a lot of the communist nations even. Well, we saw that even in World War II. You had Hitler allied with the communists at first, and then they turn on each other. There's no honor among thieves. It's, who's really going to run the world?
Yeah, true. And with that, the whole Nazis and the number of people that they killed and that terrible atrocities they committed, because this is my family background being underneath that largely or whatever. But then when the Russian communists came over and took over the same area, they actually were at least as bad, if not worse, than the Nazis.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of what you were saying about the Hegelian dialectic. Even if they're not working together, one option may be just as bad as the other option, because these guys control everything.
Exactly. Yeah. If you're trying to say which one's the good guy, Adolf Hitler or Joseph Stalin,
Right. Yeah. Right. It's sort of, what is it? My enemy's enemy is my friend. Yeah. Sometimes we're allied with terrible people to overcome one more immediate threat, when in fact is it any better to be in bed with another enemy that's just as atrocious?
Yep. Now, another thing I was just thinking on is the number of people now that would like to blame Zionism and Jews for everything. What's your thoughts on that?
Oh gosh, Tony, you put me on the spot.
Sorry.
You know, well, I mean, I have no problem standing my ground on this because I've researched this in great depth for many decades. And my thing is that I know I come under a lot of fire because everybody wants to jump on and say, because they're like, look, Epstein's Jewish
Yeah.
and Wexner's
Yeah.
Jewish and the bankers are Jewish. And so it just has to be. But it doesn't have to be. Because if you actually trace the roots of the Cabal, this ancient Babylonian cult, we won't even go all the way back to ancient Babylon. You just go back to the Khazarian mafia. So you have these Turks that they were just vicious, these Khazars. I mean, I guess it's Ottoman Empire. So what they did, they were just murderous thieves and everything. And this was their MO. This is what they did. They were road bandits largely. And so they would rob people and kill them, and they would assume their identities of those people, the travelers that they murdered. And then they would go and infiltrate. And it's been that Trojan horse thing throughout all of world history. So it was in about 800 AD that the Russian leaders had had enough of these bandits. And I mean, this was a large group. And what they say, I don't know, 60 or 80,000 converted that Russia forced to convert. And they gave them a choice they had to convert to one of the Abrahamic religions, or they were going to expel them. They were tired. They were going to basically exterminate them. So this 60 or 80,000 of these Khazarian Turks, they converted in air quotes to Judaism. So they weren't at all part of any, Hebrew bloodline or anything. These were just people who were they were forced to convert. So you follow that line all the way through history, and they have this Trojan horse thing. So you have they were the Visigoths, the Goths, the Germanic Goths. In Western Rome, they got into it with them, and they said, well, we'll give you 3,000 slaves as an offering, a peace offering. Well, those 3,000 slaves were actually some of their best warriors. So they overthrew the Western Roman Empire from within. And then you go down the line to the Sabbatines and the Frankists, and that was in the 1600s, 1700s. And the Sabbatine Jews, in air quotes, that the leader had said that he was the Messiah. He declared himself the Messiah in 1666, right? 666. And so then he had all of these followers. And what did they do after? And see, these are the Kabbalists. These are the ones who they believed that redemption through sin. And this is all the stuff we talk about in the Cabal today, the blood sacrifices and the children and they promoted incest and pedophilia and just horrors. Just anybody, just go search it. The Sabbatines or the Frankists. Okay. But then the Sabbatai Zevi, he was the founder, the one who claimed he was the Messiah. He converted to Islam in the late 1600s and brought all of his followers with him, or his inner circle of followers anyway. So then they infiltrated Islam, Trojan horse. And then Jacob Frank comes around after the original Sabbateans have done that. Jacob Frank comes along in the 1700s and says he's the reincarnation of Sabbatai Zevi. So he's also the Messiah, and he's also the reincarnation of Jacob, the patriarch of Israel. So then he has, in 1760, he tells all of his followers, the Frankist followers, to convert to Christianity. So they all, 60,000 of these Sabbatean Frankists were baptized into the Catholic Church. And so then what they do, they went right in, they started intermarrying with the royal families, they took over the Jesuit orders, you know, all of that. So when we're talking about all of the, quote unquote conspiracy theorists are saying things like, oh, it's the Jesuits doing it, it's the Jews doing it, it's, ISIS, the Islamic terrorists doing it. They're really talking about the same cabal. It's this Trojan horse. They just keep converting, they keep sending their followers into all of these established religions and established governments. And then it was Jacob Frank, that met with Adam Weishaupt and Ansel Rothschild's son for when they did the Bavarian Illuminati meeting in the 1700s. So even people who are saying the Illuminati are doing all of this, that's even just one arm. It really is, the Jesuits. It really is these Frankists, Sabbateans that's why people keep saying the Jews. And it's a trap. They do that. They've set a trap. That's why just like we were talking about earlier about them blaming the white supremacists, and that's everybody losing their YouTube channels and their Twitter accounts and stuff for anti-Semitism. That's a trap. They did that on purpose. So when people see these connections and they say, oh, all these people are Jewish, they're not. The Bible says in Revelation, a couple of places, you can pull up the verses, just type in Jews who say they are Jews but are not.
It's in chapter 2 and 3, I think.
Yeah, there you go. And Jesus says it a couple of times. He says, they say they are Jews, but they are not. They are liars. And so he said it over and over, even going back to the Pharisees and stuff. He said, you are not. You're the children of Satan. They had already infiltrated at that point. So like I said, you can go back long before the Khazarian Mafia, people who just want to blame the Khazarian Mafia. You can go back. They call them the descendants of the Pharaohs. That's where they got the term Pharisees. So this is an ancient Babylonian cult. And, the infiltration, the Trojan horse just keeps going and going. NASA, bringing all of those Nazi scientists over in Project Paperclip, again, Trojan horse. We're like, sure, come on in. We're going to get all your technology. We won the war. But they're like, it's the same thing they did with giving the 3,000 slaves to the Western Roman Empire thousands of years before. They're like, sure, we'll send all of our Nazis over to infiltrate your government and take over all your scientific agencies. Sure, we'll do that. And now they're running it. So it's just Trojan horse again and again and again. And they're not the Jews. They can be disguised as Jesuits in the Catholic Church. They can be disguised as all of the branches of Christianity. That's why we were talking about people coming out of organized religions, because so many of them have been infiltrated, and you can start to see it manifest, come to fruition when you see them start to turn, more towards the occult and all the same symbols that we see from this same cabal.
That's a very good point. And the fact is, people will try to say the Holocaust never happened and so on, and that it's all a fabrication. Well, it isn't, because like I say, that's been my family background. I'm only here because I had a grandfather who saw it coming, and the rest of his family pretty much died in one of the concentration camps. But what was really interesting is you kind of move on from there and you get people like Henry Kissinger, who's supposedly a Jew, and yet when push comes to the shove, he does not actually help the Jews at all. He was in the Watergate days under Nixon. These recordings of Kissinger basically, he tossed the Jews to the wolves.
Yeah.
So, and of course, Henry Kissinger is one of those people that you mentioned earlier that's been there through all these presidents. And look, Donald Trump calls him his good friend as well. And he's how many presidents has he been an advisor to?
Yeah, it's always like that. And that's one of my things about who the real Jews are. This trap they've made for us, they've also made it for those people who still practice Judaism as a religion. Because, my thesis is the human race is the Hebrew race. That's the way the Bible reads, not what we've been taught by all of these religious traditions. The way the Bible reads is it's the descendants of Adam. And then it goes through Noah, and it goes through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So it's the human bloodline, the descendants of Adam. The book is for humanity. We are one race, the human race. So that's the way it reads. But there are people who, practice this part of it and practice that part and practice the rituals and, the traditions. So they've trapped just as surely as you're trapped in New Zealand under a political sort of establishment that has their way, and we're trapped here in America under a political establishment that has their way and generally doesn't have our best interest at heart. The people in Israel are also, they're just people just like us. They're no different than the kids we see here at Berkeley who are parroting these mantras of this establishment. The same thing in Israel. These are just people who they try to preserve their heritage. And in my opinion, from my studies, and we won't go into this, it's a whole other subject, but where the real Jerusalem even is, in my opinion, I don't believe it is where they're at. I believe that the Rothschilds set that up, or the Cabal in general. I know we use the term Rockefellers, Rothschilds a lot, but the Cabal in general, that's the new ghetto. Just like they, on a smaller form in Germany, made all of the Jews move to one area, so that they could be more easily controlled and then exterminated. I believe that's why the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers have collected the Jewish remnant from the people who practice Judaism, not the Hebrews, but the Jewish religion, or the tribe of Judah, I guess you could say. They've moved them there in this desert wasteland as part of a control mechanism. And those people who have come to live in Israel, that everybody's like, Israel's doing this and Mossad's controlling everything. Well, those people are no different than us. You could look at us and say, because Hillary Clinton did this, or Bill Clinton did this, or Donald Trump did this, and you could say, those Americans are, like the Middle East, they'll say, it's little Satan and big Satan and all this stuff. But us, we the people, we don't have anything to do with that. We don't live in their privilege. We're not part of their networks. We've never even met them in person, the most of us. And it's the same way in Israel. And so it breaks my heart when people fall into that trap, that anti-Semitism, and take it to the extreme. The Holocaust never happened. I mean, that just breaks my heart.
Totally does, because, for example, my family, obviously my grandfather got to New Zealand 6 weeks before this happened, but his own father and other family members went to a camp in Terrorism where basically 144,000, which is an interesting number, of Jews were sent, and there were only 23,000 known survivors after it, That is a heck of a lot of people dying in one place, and it was a mixture of a ghetto and a concentration camp. And apparently at first the Jewish leaders there were the ones that were able to choose which ones were sent off to be slaughtered, because they had to allow for new ones to come in. But eventually, towards the end, the SS basically took the decision away, and they just decided who was going to go, But there's a lot of people that died in it, and anyone that says the Holocaust didn't happen, I have no time for those people. They haven't actually, they have an agenda, or they haven't studied it, because it surely did happen.
Yeah, I really think that they just haven't studied it. There's so many really powerful propaganda pieces out there that present that type of thing just to trap people who are on on the heels of truth, to grab them and mislead them aside into believing stuff like that. But if they did any research at all, they would know that it absolutely did happen. And not just for the Jews, like we were talking about the Ottoman Empire and the Khazarian mafia
Yeah,
in Turkey. See, it
a
continued
million,
there.
a
And
million
the in
Christians.
our oh my gosh, the
Yeah,
what was it, 3 million Armenian,
yeah,
Assyrian, and Greek Christians were just massacred. They just came into the schools and got the children, like it would, just came to their doors. It was like the night of the long knives. It was just genocide, Christian genocide, and it really happened. That's why it drives me crazy. And it was the Young Turks, right?
yeah,
So that's why it drives me crazy when we have media propaganda outlets like the Young Turks on MSNBC. What kind of sadistic maniac would name their news channel the Young
yeah.
Turks and have an American flag torn to shreds as their graphic behind them? And and here we have all of these people watching them, and they don't even know what the term Young Turks means.
Mm.
That these were genocidal maniacs that massacred 3.5 million Armenian Christians. So it's, and the Young Turks also, again, with the infiltration going all the way back to Hollywood, that was the name that they used for the golden era, the sort of Jack Nicholson, Jane Fonda era stars that they brought up and placed in these positions. And they called them the Young Turks, that they came in. They were the bold and beautiful that everybody wanted to see, and they paraded them around to build this sort of culture. And what do we see? Jack Nicholson supporting Roman Polanski, a known pedophile that drugged and raped a 13-year-old little girl. We see Jane Fonda going over and betraying the POWs during the Vietnam War when they're passing her notes, and she gives them to the communists so that those people were executed and beat. These are the Young Turks, and people they worship these Hollywood celebrities. So, I mean, it's not just Antifa or ISIL or, Hitler. It's a network of people, and it just is mind-boggling that people have gotten so out of touch with world history that they think that's a red flag. When you call yourself the Young Turks,
Yeah,
that's it's atrocious.
totally agree. Yeah. So now we're getting on towards time we'll have to wrap up. Have you got any thoughts that you'd like to really get across at the end of this to the people that are listening? And this has just been an awesome discussion, and we'll have to do it again, by the way, because we've really,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like we're just like kind of getting out of second gear at the moment, and the time's pretty much up.
Yeah, that's true. We didn't even get into the Bear Stearns, Robert Stearns stuff that I found out at Dalton School. Absolutely amazing. Um, Final thoughts really would just be not for people not to fall into these traps that we talked about. That they have The Bible says to be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove, and they are diabolical. I mean, the Hegelian dialectic doesn't just break into two parts, it breaks into all parts. They have infiltrated their Trojan horse into all sides. So that includes the truth movement. So please, that would be the one thing that I see that really troubles me in the truth community. And it's going to bring a lot of people down, a lot of good people. And I want to warn people, please don't fall into the anti-Semitism. The Jews are not our enemies. There's a very specific crime syndicate, and it doesn't matter what they call themselves. It doesn't matter if they call themselves Kabbalists or if they call themselves Jesuits. It doesn't matter. It's a very specific crime syndicate. So, I would say, please, people, don't fall into that trap, because it's just going to cost you. It's going to cost you your channel. It's going to cost you your voice. So be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And for everybody else that isn't falling for that, I would just say hang in there and be strong, because when the Bible says when darkness comes in like a flood, that God raises up a standard against it. And we are that standard. We are the body of Christ. And the glory is rising upon us. We are opening the eyes of people, and our eyes are being opened by the Holy Spirit, step by step by step. So no fear. Don't ever have fear. We've read the end of the book. They don't win. Yeah, there's going to be some tribulation before the whole network comes down and the reign of Christ and peace is established. But don't fear. Please don't fall into fear. I know it's hard. Like you said in the beginning, you get a little bit discouraged when you just see the reach, the absolute reach of this crime syndicate. But, be encouraged, because that which is in us is greater than that which is in the world. And that would be my final word.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jan, for being on the Minute to Midnight show today. And we will definitely have to do this again soon if you're into it, because I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Tony.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, Tony.
Awesome. So, Jan, before we go, can you tell the listeners where they can find you online?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably XtremeRealityCheck.com. That's my main website. Now, that's just with an X. There's no EX on it for extreme. It's just extreme with an X, XtremeRealityCheck.com. And on YouTube, our main channel is Extreme Reality Check. Also the same way, just starting with an X. We're on BitChute. We're on Twitch. We're on DLive. We're everywhere. So just check for Extreme Reality Check, or if you go to our main website, all the links are there.
Awesome, and I do suggest people do that because, like I said at the beginning of the show, your research is awesome, second to none.
Thank you. I'm flattered.
Folks would appreciate it if you like and share this video, and if you're not already subscribed to our YouTube channel, our iTunes channel, and following our A Minute to Midnight website, that you do that as well would be great. And you can donate to A Minute to Midnight on our website as well. We run A Minute to Midnight 100% by donations, and you can do that donating to us, as I said, on our website, and that's much appreciated. We thank the people that do help us and support us. It's not possible to do this without your help. And also you can find articles, some really good new articles on the website, so you won't find them on YouTube or whatever. You'll have to go to the website and read our articles. And we have a Facebook group too, and also a forum at the A Minute to Midnight website. And all music that gets used in A Minute to Midnight videos is written, played and recorded by me, and you can download it at the website if you want. God bless, have a great week, and hopefully we'll catch you in a few days' time with another show.